Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the Minister of Agriculture's digital series for this year. We have a really great session to end off the series, the Entrepreneur Forum, Staying Resilient in Challenging Times. And we have a really great turnout for this session, so I thank you for being here this morning. My name is Nick Bell, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour and a half. Before we get to our 5 excellent speakers, we have a few items to get through. So in terms of housekeeping, if you've attended any of our previous sessions, and I hope you all have, all of the participants will have their audio and video turned off during the webinar. Today's session is really intended to be a forum or a roundtable, so there's no slides or PowerPoint. So we really do encourage you to send in any questions you have for the panelists and sort of make this discussion get what you want out of it. And to do that, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Our panel and I will be keeping an eye on that, and throughout the discussion, we'll certainly get to as many questions as we can. It's a great opportunity to ask questions to these fine people on here on our panel and get just a little bit of their insight. So like I said, we really do encourage questions. It's not here on the slide, but I do know that Perennia is recording today's session, and the recording will be posted shortly after on Perennia's YouTube page, along with all the other sessions in the digital series. And I believe you can access that YouTube page if you can't find it directly on YouTube. I think you can find it right from the Perennia page that you're registered on. After the session, Perennia will also send out an email to all of the audience with the contact information that our panelists were nice enough to share with us. So before getting to introduce our sponsors for the series and introduce our panelists, we do have some greetings from the Honourable Keith Colwell, Minister of Agriculture. So I will play those now.
As Minister of Agriculture for the province of Nova Scotia, I'd like to welcome today's series on entrepreneurship, the forum we're having today. As an entrepreneur myself, it's something I thought would be very appropriate to have a discussion around this very important topic. You hear so many times about schools talking, training someone to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't work like that. You're either born to be an entrepreneur, or you decide when you're at some time in your life that you want to become an entrepreneur. And it seems to be in your blood. And the people today are shining examples of that, the hard work they've done, and how much they've accomplished against all odds in most cases. And really have succeeded. And I thought it was very important to have this type of conversation. So many farmers are entrepreneurs in their own right, and so many business people in our province that make our economy grow. And this has not been discussed before, and it's very unfortunate it hadn't been. So I'm excited to see that our Farm Credit Canada is our sponsor today, along with Nova Scotia Farm Loan Board. And they're wonderful organizations that have helped so many people in our province and will continue to do so. When you look at what we've accomplished in the province over the last 8 years, I'm very, very happy with that. And to see how our farms have grown, our succession plannings are in place now, some of the issues I've seen early on. This goes to the entrepreneurial spirit of our farmers and our farming community. And farming and farm products are our 3rd biggest export in our province. Think about that. Fisheries is number 1, 2.3 billion. Michelin tires around 1.2 billion, 1.2 billion, I believe. Very important employer for the province as well. And agricultural products is around 500 million. I'm looking forward to today when that can be a billion. And also the important work that agriculture does at replacing imports. Import replacement is just as good as an export. So if you add the two of them together, we're probably around $1 billion of net value, and one of the biggest employers in the province. So I want to send a word out, a positive word to all the entrepreneurs in our province. All farmers are entrepreneurs. And this session today should be very interesting. It's one I'm looking that we continue in the future as we put more conferences on. And next year, hopefully it'll be live and a combination of live and the virtual one like we're doing today. Everyone stay well, make sure you get your vaccines and wear your masks and do all the things you need to stay safe and healthy. Thank you again for everyone in the industry that's helps employ so many Nova Scotians and helps put in place career opportunities for young people in our province to stay here. Thank you.
So as Minister Colwell introduced, the digital series does have two fantastic presenting sponsors, Farm Credit Canada, or FCC, and the Nova Scotia Farm Loan Board. And we also have a couple of videos from each of them. So I will play those now. And I will warn you that the audio is just a bit louder on FCC and Farm Loan Board's videos.
Who is FCC? Well, our About Us is really about you, the goals you want to reach, and the dreams you have. You're invested in your business, and as the only lender 100% invested in Canadian agriculture and food, so are we. Because a dream is just the start. It also needs a lender who understands where your dreams come from, where they can go, and what it takes to get there. If you want to start, grow, or transform your agriculture or food business, we can help. Because we're not just your lender. We're your champion, your catalyst, and we're behind you every step of the way. We are FCC. Dream. Grow. Thrive.
Okay, and Farm Loan Board.
My name is Alphonse Vermeulen. My wife and I farm 50 dairy cows on a robot in Urbania, Nova Scotia.
We actually got married in 2014 and bought the farm in 2014. And originally we owned a tie stall in Princeport, and it was just January of 2020 that we moved to this site in Urbania.
We've been working with the Farm Loan Board since the beginning, when we first bought the farm in Princeport. The Farm Loan Board was more flexible with the challenges we were facing trying to enter the industry.
They helped us actually to do this site switch. They provided us with a loan that helped us to retrofit the barn that we're standing in right now. That was a tremendous help. It was a big step for us to move from the tie stall to the milking facility that we have here.
So with the loan board, we're character lenders, and we do like to develop relationships with our clients. And what that means is through the years, we get to see how people are progressing and how they're growing. We get to see their weaknesses as well as their strengths. We do look at, we review their financials yearly, and we like to see where we can make that better and make them stronger.
So we're really a complement to the other lending options. You know, we say that we don't compete with banks or other lending agencies. What we really want to do is provide a solution for farmers that is different than what's being offered commercially. Really diving down on the business plan, working with them to make sure that they have a partnership with other programs or granting opportunities is really what we're focused on.
They understood a lot of things that even we didn't understand, and it really helped us navigate some tough times when you're trying to get into the industry.
Okay, thank you, Minister Colwell, for your message, and a special thank you to the Farm Loan Board and for FCC for sponsoring this series. And as the Minister gave us a sneak peek there, we hope to get back into regular programming live and a combination of live and virtual, so that should be great for next year. So without further ado, as I mentioned before, we have a terrific set of 5 panelists for today. I hope you've had a chance to take a look at their bios while you were registering for today's session. Each one has a great perspective for working through challenging times, whether that be in the establishment of a new business or growth, or just day-to-day operations of existing agriculture and agri-food businesses. So rather than give a brief intro to each of the panelists, I'm going to ask the panelists to please introduce themselves and a bit about their business. And panelists, while you're doing that, I would ask to get our discussion going to please tell our audience what was one of the biggest challenges you've faced through your business, or one that you've helped another ag entrepreneur persevere through, and how did you work through that? So I will stop sharing my screen with that. And I'm hoping everyone can see all of the panelists now. And I guess we'll ask Brian to start us off.
I always have to go first.
Sorry, Brian.
That's all right. Hi, my name is Brian Alloway. I'm a general manager of Coconut Goodness Food Products. We are a manufacturer of probiotics here in Dartmouth and Burnside. I've been with the company for a few years now. I used to own a company called Acadian Maple, where we were a gourmet food manufacturer and exporter, but family business, and we sold it, and I've moved on.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brian. Jason, I've got you on here next.
All right, I'm Jason Lynch, chef by trade. Been in the Nova Scotia industry for many years. Also own a specialty food product company. And that goes to next question. One of my biggest challenges over the years was extending the season, being a rural business operator. So my specialty food product line was a byproduct of that. I had to find a way to generate revenue in the slower season, being rural. So hence that led into the development of the food product line 15 years ago.
Good, Jason. I think we'll hear seasonality is a big challenge for all of us. Brian, do you want? I skipped right over the question part. Do you want to jump back to you, Brian? I guess what was the biggest one of the challenges you've faced through your business, or when you've helped someone else persevere through, and how did you work through that?
I would say probably the biggest challenge we've had is finding good qualified people to work for us and to operate. We've done, as a result of not being able to find people, we found good people, but hard, people without the proper skill set. So we've had to develop over the years a lot of in-house training and mentorship programs and things like that.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Joseph, I've got you on here next.
I'm Joseph Crocker. I run Peasant's Pantry. I'm the chef and owner of it in New Ross, Nova Scotia. We're a specialty Italian style deli. One of the biggest challenges I had was we were doing whole animal butchery, and we ran into a big surplus of product to use, and freezers were full. So I actually have taken a look into the past. So started doing salamis and prosciuttos and things that would are shelf stable like that.
Okay, very good. And Mike, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Mike Lightfoot from D&M Lightfoot Farms Limited and Lightfoot and Wolfville Vineyards. I'm a multi-generational farmer who has owned businesses in the past outside of agriculture and developed, I guess you could call me a serial entrepreneur. We currently have a winery and a restaurant, agritourism business just here in Wolfville. And most of my family, my kids, wife, we're a family business. So I guess probably one of the biggest challenges that we've had is diversifying the family farm to keep commodities ever changing. It basically is one of the main reasons why we've been able to weather the storms of the last few years with frosts and short seasons and all kinds of COVID now. Being diversified on the farm has been something that we've concentrated on. So it has helped insulate us in the last few years from feeling the true effects of.
Very good. Thanks, Mike. At last, but certainly not least, Sean, I'll get you to do your intro.
Sure, thanks. We're Food Bites thrilled to be here today. There's a lot of depth on this panel, and we're humbled by the group that's put together. So I'm very, very grateful to be included. My name is Sean Pinder. I'm the co-founder of Food Bite. I'm a serial entrepreneur. My latest venture includes Food Bite, which is an attempt at being the easiest and fastest way to build and manage food safety plans. So it's a digital play on the bottleneck concerns that exist for any agri-food processor, farmer, et cetera. In the in the early days of COVID, one of the first things I conducted was a litmus test on the validity of what we were doing. And thankfully, Nova Scotia is blessed with a lot of talented people, some of whom are on the panel today. And when you begin talking and reaching out to your network to confirm or not confirm what you're doing as a good idea, bad idea, you're sure that you really become grateful for that network. And I think that's something that it was a big challenge for us being a startup, was to validate what we were doing and ensuring that there was a bright future. So knowing that there was people that support entrepreneurs and willing to give their time, that was the biggest thing we did, biggest hurdle that took quite a bit of time, if nothing else, mental time of my own, to validate that we were headed in the right path. So definitely the biggest challenge was validation for us, and given the circumstances, it took quite a while to do that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sean. I think that's one nice thing in Nova Scotia agriculture is that, we sometimes feel like a big place, but it's a small circle of people. And I think there's a lot of people that are willing to share their expertise and that kind of thing with each other. So that's really great. I'll ask another question, and I guess I'll just open it up to any of the panelists to sort of jump in first. Looking forward, what do you see as sort of in the short to medium term as challenges facing Nova Scotia agriculture and agri-food? And how can the entrepreneurs that are listening today build resiliency to persevere through those challenges? So just open that up for anyone to jump in. Jason, I see you've unmuted yourself. So.
Oh, I just didn't remute myself. So, I mean, it goes back to a conversation we were just having with Brian. I mean, there's just so many things in the current situation that keep popping up. It changes every day from supply of containers, bottles. We were discussing earlier before we jumped into the forum, like as I think Brian had said that, I mean, who would have guessed leading into this that pressure treated lumber would have been an issue in the middle of this? So there's really no way to know. And that just goes back to being resilient and patient, trusting your decisions and trying to adapt as quickly as possible.
Mike, you're nodding your head there.
And I also unmuted, yeah. I echo Jason with packaging, for instance. I mean, I think I'll touch on that first and then maybe go longer term. But with regard to packaging, we've all used that cliche pivot, for us. We couldn't get bottles and we couldn't get boxes and labels in time because of all of the shutdowns. So we pivoted a lot of our product into kegs, and here at the winery, we've consequently run some numbers on serving kegged wine on our own patio, and just in sheer savings and waste reduction, it's created silver linings for our business just to look at this. And I don't think we'll ever package that material ever again now that we've made this switch. So often with challenges, the entrepreneur is faced with trying to profit or try to come forward on it, lean in, if you will. So if the entrepreneur facing these challenges, whether it's COVID or weather or what have you, can always remember somewhere, somehow within this, there's a way to actually do better, to pivot your business into waste reduction or more profitability or what have you. And I think the other challenge more long-term I'll just touch on is climate change. We all have to be really cognizant of how we're treating agriculturalists and food production producers. I think that climate change will be more of a long-term challenge that we'll all have to face, certainly.
Yeah. Mike, you mentioned that you ran the numbers on doing that. Do you have any insight on sort of being able to have the systems or at least the experience in yourself or in staff to be able to sort of have good data to make those kinds of decisions on?
Yeah, we're blessed, as some of the other panelists, Sean in particular, pointed out, to have a large staff. And within that staff, we have people who are beautiful musicians, and we have people who are really gifted with computer spreadsheet, ability to build predictor models electronically. And it's just a matter of when we started to recognize that our staff actually were, even if they were working in the retail serving wine to tourists, they actually had gifts that we could use. So we started to really pay attention to our employees and what other things that we could do. And yeah, we were lucky to find within our own staff people who were proficient from other careers in building these internal systems for us to measure this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to have that information. Sean, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to layer on both Jason and Michael's point. I think it's vital when you go through extenuating circumstances like a pandemic, to maybe look at your liabilities and options to convert those to profit centers for your business, right? And sometimes your network can help you do that. We're not all in competing businesses. I think that's one thing maybe that Nova Scotia should probably look to do as far as some sort of healthy center that brings a diverse group of people to go together to help others. I'd certainly be happy to spend a bit of time each week helping other entrepreneurs. But from our perspective, it's great to say you want to look at these liabilities and convert to profit centers. But some of the feedback we get, particularly as we look at helping farmers with Canada GAAP compliance, says that they're spending farmers, not on a Canadian scale, not the largest, but they're spending 300 to 700 hours administering Canada GAAP. That is a huge bottleneck that we need to help our producers, agri-food, and farmers with. That's something that's going to take, it's full scale across the board, but that's definitely something that, I think needs to, that's a short, medium, and long-term play strategy that needs to be identified and needs to be dealt with. It was identified in the last bill, or budget from the Liberals federally. So that is something that needs to be tabled and identified to help some of the entrepreneurs, but farmers too, that are like Michael, that are third, fourth generation, right? There are struggles that are very real. And, I think one of the things that we lack is digital solutions to help those farmers. Let computers do what they can do well, which is repetitive things, right? And let the humans provide the value, the strategy. And you talk even Michael's point, right? Aggregating data to the point where we can, whether it's Foodbite or whomever, it doesn't matter, give it back to the producer, the Lynches and the Alloways of the world, so they can go, okay, I can run my business better because of this data. Like that is so simple in its understanding, but there's a huge lack of it. And that's not just for Foodbite. There is so much data across so many sectors in agri-food to look at.
Self-muted. Sorry about that. How about you, Joseph?
Well, I agree with studying the data. It certainly makes a difference for my business. Sorry, I have multiple pieces. I'm trying to lose a thought. I think short-term experts, we're going to be needing more experts. There's not that many people that with the knowledge base that we need, like on my end for specialty meat, for instance, to carry through rapidly. And the ones we have are working so much that they're starting to become a little ineffective, at least for me and my experiences. So, because I'm mainly self-taught in the meat manufacturing aspect through the federal guidelines. One of the problems we had, I was talking about the meat curing earlier, we ran into was I kind of knew what I had to do, but I just didn't want to do it. So that's when I had to rip off Band-Aids, and that's what like COVID really did. It's like you said about following numbers, Sean. I just stopped doing things that were dead weight that I really liked, but you just couldn't continue to carry it and try. You had to step up to what people liked and what they wanted and what was working and just do it.
Okay, thank you. Brian, do you have anything you want to add on there?
Well, I think if you come to a problem solving session without data, you're just another person with an opinion. You know, you need data to make decisions. And you know, I'm a big follower of lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, and one of the major, you know, 7 wastes of production is the non-use of employee talent. You know, it's one of the main ones. And like going back to what Michael said, you know, if you got people on staff that have these crazy skills that you don't know about, you got to know about that. You know, you got to know your people and you got to know what they're able to do. And I think a lot of like I've just been inundated with phone calls from friends and people I've never met before in the agri-food world here and in the Maritimes looking for help in the last 12 months. And I think a lot of it is people that had small problems or even minor annoyances in the past. You know, COVID has ballooned those into like mission critical burning deck issues. And all of a sudden everyone's panicking and trying to fix these problems. And, you know, having data to fix those problems, having data to decide, you know, like right now there's massive supply chain issues, you know, trying to get bottles and packaging, you know, so like trying to pivot and decide what products. I've only got, you know, 4 weeks of bottles left. What products am I going to put in those bottles? Because I might not get those for another 12 months. You know, having the data to quickly be able to make those decisions is really important. And there's lots of free tools out there. And if you have Microsoft Excel, you can do forecasting and like in Power BI, you can do all these cool like visual data models and stuff, and it's all free. And you know, you can sit yourself down in front of YouTube and teach yourself that really quickly. But having, you know, just making blind decisions is a really bad idea. You got to have the data to support making those business critical decisions in these times for sure.
Yeah, you know, data is something that we seem to have got stuck talking about. You know, is there any tips that you guys have on? Like Brian, you mentioned sort of that there's lots of resources available on YouTube and stuff, but where do people sort of get started with, you know, maybe they think I don't have that much data in my operation, but, you know, where do people get started in figuring out, you know, what they should be gathering or what would be helpful? I don't know if any of you have thoughts on that or what's worked for you.
One thing, Nick, I think that we focus on is what we just call a feedback loop. Right, is so you test something, right, by just asking a question. Is it yes or no? Is it multiple? It doesn't matter. But the point is that you have to start somewhere, right? And you need to start collecting data to help you make better decisions. And if you are at that point where you've never collected data before, let me say this. I think it's really, really important to start small and to build your collection base, because if you go and shoot, I'll use the sort of military case here. If you shoot a cannonball right at your customer for feedback, you're going to have no idea if you hit and hit correctly, if you missed and how badly. You want to shoot little bullets out into the market to get instant feedback. And there are hundreds of ways you can do that. I mean, just think of the modes of communication, all the mediums that exist today. There's no excuse not to get it, right? And you can do the same with your employees. You know, to Michael's point, how did Michael find out that he had some really talented people that would augment their service offering, right? Or not augment, but add value to, right? I mean, that's the way you got to look at these things. But again, if you have never collected data before, I urge you to start small and to build from there. And it's okay to, you know, just look at it like every Friday. We meet every Friday, and we might have 4 new pieces of information. So that's 4 pieces I didn't have. And now that I have 4 divisions at Food Bite, I get 16 pieces of information every week. That is really valuable. So start small, little bullets, not cannonballs.
That sounds like a good idea. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, so just to jump in there, I mean, when you're first starting out, I mean, it's really hard to even figure out what type of data you should be building, how to go about doing it. First and foremost, Sean has a valid point. I mean, start small, take little bits. But I mean, one of the biggest things that helped me years ago was my network. When you just step back for a minute and think about it, it's surprising how big all of our networks really are, and how much people want to help in this space. So within a couple of phone calls, when I first started out, I was connected to people that could help me and get me started on the right foot, just pointed in the right direction. Not them necessarily jumping in or helping me, but pointing me in the right direction. And I took it slow and started building out my database of what I needed. And, you know, it touches on a lot of points, and the customer feedback is valuable as well, but it goes back to Michael's point about employees and staff, and Brian's point as well. Sometimes you got amazing employees that don't necessarily have the skill set, but they are amazing employees. They have a lot to offer as far as information and view of what you're doing. And it's amazing how much data they can actually supply and help you build out as well. So in simple terms, start small and use your network around you. You'd be surprised how many connections there's actually within it.
Yeah, very good. Brian, Mike, Joseph, anybody want to add on there?
It doesn't have to be complicated. You know, I can barely even spell math, you know. If you're creating invoices in QuickBooks or Civil Accounting or whatever, and even better, if you're running any sort of traceability program, especially if it's any sort of electronic format, you're collecting data. You've got tons of data that you can mine, and all you need to do is like add and subtract and multiply and divide. It's pretty simple. You know, you export some sales data out of QuickBooks online, and you throw it into a spreadsheet and you sort it alphabetically or numerically. Like, I mean, that's really all you need to do. I mean, you can get a lot more complicated than that, but you can discern a lot of information from the data you're already collecting. You're collecting a ton of data already, probably, without even realizing it. The other thing too is that in my experience, like, data is great, but you know, data is no good if you don't know it exists, you know. And that's why I've always implemented morning huddles. Like, we have a daily morning huddle with our entire staff every day before production. It's scripted. We have an SOP for it, and you would not believe the barriers that are broken down in those morning huddles, because you get everyone together and it's like, you've got your retail department over here that's struggling with this problem. You got someone over here in manufacturing that's causing the problem and they didn't know. So, you know, you can fix that, or, you know, you can share data, and you don't want to be siloed. So you want to be able to, and even small organizations get very siloed. So you want to be able to share that data across departments or across categories, and be able to use that data, because you might be collecting data over here that somebody else over here, you know, is worth a lot. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I'll add on to that.
Sean.
You know, sorry.
No, Sean, please.
Was the you know, we had a recent discovery by a developer related to traceability, and that's because we meet as a team once a week, and just meeting as a team is a form of a feedback loop, right? If you've got two different divisions, they can help one another. There's cross-pollination, if you want to call it that, what have you. But you know, there's lots of simple ways to you know, overcome, whether, you know, in this case where we're talking about challenging times and opportunities ahead. I mean, that's one of the first places to start, is keeping it simple, right? Like, you got an electronic problem with your car and you're picturing this $1,500 bill, you go to the mechanic and he changes the fuse, right? They always start simple, right? Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, it's perfect. It builds right into what I want to touch on, which is systemization of any organization. And again, start small. Everybody's absolutely correct on this, but what's taken me years to realize is what I really like as far as leadership now is creating my employees, creating a sense of ownership. And so I like to motivate all of my employees to come forward with their ideas through making them owners and not renters. This organization of our 75 employees across 5 or 6 different income streams. And, you know, we talked about the cadence of meetings, the importance of creating platforms for your employees to feed into you. But it's really the head of the organization has to come forward with a problem, present a problem, pick a small team of capable individuals from a diverse subsection of your organization, and basically mount the problem to them and allow, you know, I mean, you're going to get a lot of dialogue. It's uncomfortable to do this at first. When you come from an old-fashioned kind of hierarchy, I just tell you how it goes and you're just going to do it. And that was how I was raised and how I started my business. But things have gotten a lot easier for me by transitioning into, you know, this type of leadership, which is creating owners of problems. Everybody loves to fix problems. When you present them to your crew or even a sub committee of your crew, and it can be in the farmyard, across, you know, at a tailgate meeting. We have every Wednesday a very serious high-level management meeting that's inclusive of all individuals. Then we have a Monday morning toolbox meeting and a daily huddle, and we do it every single day, even if there's nothing to talk about. Some days it feels like a waste of money, but you'd be surprised what comes out of those meetings, and it gives employees a platform to be able to reach the organization's leaders. Again, creating owners of problems, they're going to work on that for you, and they're going to really strive to see that those problems are fixed. Creating systems, creating the system is what I call, we all understand the methodology of McDonald's, not the best food, don't sue me McDonald's, but it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed in minutes, it's consistent, a kid can do it. Thinking about systems within your organization that you can create and document so that the savings that you do discover and the waste reduction that you do recover doesn't go back to the old ways. It becomes a system. It's locked into the way that you do things moving forward. So that's the important step of identifying savings and identifying new valuable ways of doing things, is to create a system around it and lock it in.
Mike, you must have had some trouble with, and all of you, with implementing those sort of huddle meetings and that sort of culture and ideology to get people to buy in and bring stuff forward to those meetings. So, but it sounds important for sure.
The note I would go is, I'm apparently a lot smaller than everybody else. I have hands-on almost every part of my business because I have to, not necessarily by choice. But to take it all the way back to the grassroots, when I started in markets, have a pad and paper, make simple notes and start, like Sean said. I did checks of how many customers I had, just as I did a sale. And then I did tally at the end of the treat like a business. So I knew my average customer bill. And then slowly, as you're working it, you realize what they are buying or what they're not buying. If you're not even started yet, go to the markets with a pad and paper. See who's got the bigger lineups, see what they're selling. Go to sit in a cafe and watch what people are doing. It's low tech, but we all have squares and POSs as we get going, and it gives you lots of information for free too. I mean, it's your information. You're basically paying for it. But.
Hey, Joseph, you mentioned too, you changed your product mix based on sort of like feedback or information. Like, could you tell us how, you know, what steps you took to figure that out?
Well, again, I'm hands on it. So, you know, kind of like, oh, I'm making this batch every 3 months or whatever. You just slowly started to get to the point where it's just, you're holding on to it because you're really trying to look after a regular customer, and they're the ones buying the whole batch. And it's like, you feel bad, but then you're like, well, if you really, really want it, I will make you a batch, and you just buy the whole batch and take it home because you just can't maintain it anymore. Also coming across things that I had wanted to do, and that was my driving passion, and it turns out other people wanted it too. And so it gave me that opportunity to make it and develop it. I just needed to know enough knowledge behind it and be confident enough to be able to pull it off. There's a lot of fear with air dried meats and stuff, and they just need to be treated with respect and professionalism. And that's all I got, I guess. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, we sort of looked forward. If I could challenge the panel to sort of think back, so having gone through some sort of challenging years recently with COVID that we're still in the last couple of days, especially, but even some of like the weather challenges in the last couple of years that would affect some of your businesses, I'm sure. If you could sort of turn back time, would there be something you'd do differently in your business with your clients? You know, is there any mistakes you've made that would be good things for these folks to learn from and get through quickly with your advice. So I'll open that to anybody that wants to jump in. Jason, I noticed you unmuted yourself, so.
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean, if I went back, no, I wouldn't change anything. The only slight change I would make is, maybe on a couple of those mistakes that I made, I should have been a little smarter and, recording the data from it. But that was one thing I learned from making those mistakes. I wouldn't be where I am today without making those mistakes. Mistakes are a huge opportunity. They're an opportunity to learn, to adapt, and to grow. So for me, no, I just don't feel I'd be where I am today without having made those mistakes and learning from them. And sometimes it takes a while for that lesson to sink in. It may not be immediate. It may take a little time, but no, I think they're huge opportunities to adapt and grow your business and grow as an individual. Touching on all those points that the other panelists have made. To me, they're extremely valuable. So,
if I can go there, maybe just tying back to the last point that Mike and Joe were talking about, and of course your last question. Every day I tell the team, let's just be wrong less today than we were yesterday. There is no assumption that you are going to go through a day and you're going to get 10 stars because you're right 10 times. That's impossible. It's not humane. So how do you build that culture that takes the mistakes like Jason talked about? And it's not the mistakes, right? Those are going to happen every day, every week. It's what do you do as the leader of your organization to learn from those and then to bestow that ownership upon the others, to let them know, look, this is collective. I'm in this with you. My winery doesn't grow if you don't grow as a person, or my restaurant isn't any better tomorrow if we all don't learn from this. I can learn all I want, but if it's not top to bottom sort of approach. I lost my other train of thought, so I'll have to come back.
No worries. Sounds like seeing mistakes as sort of opportunities rather than just mistakes is it's a good theme. Brian, Mike, Joseph. Oh, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say, record the mistakes. There's nothing wrong with owning it. It doesn't matter who it is, and it's also like, asking permission to share a story of a mistake that happened in someone's life, an employee's life, right, and professionally, probably, and then share that with the team in terms of how that person solved it. That's the type of culture that is going to propel your business, because when you can take your playbook, how you operate, and bestow that 10 times, your company is extraordinary for that purpose, that reason, right? Like if you I'm laughing because that's really hard to do. But if you have that methodology every day of taking, Brian's food safety knowledge every day and bestowing that in terms of how to be, leaner each day in his case, because that's his belief with, the lean philosophy. I mean, that's how you grow and get better. And I know we're trying to look backwards in terms of what we do better, but those are all related to mistakes. So that's how I'm tying that together.
Yeah, for sure. Joseph, how about you? You can go ahead there.
Yeah. Well, Jason probably already know about this because Jason's a good friend and a mentor of mine. And I worked for him for many years, but I had ran into a problem when I first started doing salamis because I was doing a product, not getting lab work back fast enough. Didn't think there was anything wrong, but it also come down to is just generally I didn't have enough knowledge. And so what I ended up problem was it's the first chance to get a vacation in 6 years. So I'm in Calgary and I'm trying to respond to the federal inspector, the provincial inspector, and I think it was Perennia, but I don't think it was Perth Perennia. Anyway, an inspector, and deal with my wife and my friends and be on vacation. And it's a 4-hour time change. I thought my head was going to explode. But what it taught me is you got to know, because it wasn't that I wasn't doing something necessarily right or wrong. We just had a problem, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And so keep reading. You just find little bits and pieces. And now it's and I just keep adjusting to my systems to what makes it better for us and our small layout, and not what's better for somebody else that I learned the first way of doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So the
For
first
sure.
meat course I took was biofood tech, and it was a one of the federal guideline kind of pH test, air dry, whatever. But there's like 6 charts in there that adjust to what you need. So you just take which chart you need that fits the product you want to develop, and you can develop it. But I didn't know any of that until I really slid down that slope. And then I started reading even more than I was, buying university books and taking courses and learning more.
Yeah. Continuous or lifelong learning for sure. That's something that all of us try to take part in. Brian, Mike, is anything you want to tack on to anything so far?
I don't make mistakes. I think we once had 40,000 bottles show up to our customer in Europe with the wrong color cap on them. We also had about 20-some thousand bottles with the wrong UPC code put on them, and we caught it like the night before it was to ship out. And you know, if I was going to change something, I would say stop breaking your own policies, because in both of those cases, we had several checks and balances in place through quality control and through receiving, through purchasing, everything. And you know, after those big events, I would always get the staff together, divide them in 2, do a proper root cause analysis to figure out what went wrong. Because I mean, you know, it was costing us $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a pop, very expensive mistakes. And you know, we would get the staff together, we'd figure out, and again, going back to employee talent, you know, you learn a lot when you bring the employees up into a boardroom and get them to tell you what you're doing wrong. In my experience, people don't have any problem telling you what you're doing wrong. But it always, pretty much always 90% of the time came down to breaking our own policy. And, you know, COVID has lowered the waters, and it's exposed the rocks. And, you know, now is not the time to be breaking policy. You know, you need to have your policy, you need to have your standardization in place, and you need to follow those more than ever. And I always get the excuse, oh, we're so busy, we can't do this, I can't do that check, I can't count it when it comes in. It's just, there's too much going on. But I've always said to all of my staff that, you know, this is when you get super busy and it's really stressful and there's a lot on the line, that's when you have to follow your procedures and policy more than ever, because that's, you know, it's critical. And, you know, we learned a lot from that.
Okay. Mike, any final thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I jotted down forever learning. It's, you know, very similar to the other panelists. If you think you know it all, that's really when things start to go really bad for you. If you're constantly seeking out your mentors and also trying to help maybe your mentees, you know, maybe, you know, Joseph and Jason, I know have a great relationship and with helping one another, as do many other folks on the panel. But for instance, you know, you've got to give as much as what you take. So if you take from your mentors, and you should try to collect. It doesn't matter what you're involved in, whether you're an egg farmer or whether you're, you know, a young farmer trying to get in and grow your business. You should look to other more successful people in your industry and doing the things that you'd like to be doing that share the same ethos and philosophies as you'd like to emulate. And in turn, once you start to get some traction, you just go for it. Try to approach mentors and learn from them. The internet is incredible. You can ask you have to be a little bit careful with that. But also, once you get up and going, bring on some mentees, bring on some other, you know, lesser fortunate or earlier in their careers, and start to try to get them under your wing and teach them what someone else has given to you. And it all kind of works in a big karma, you know, circle, and it will all come back to you. But never think you know it all. Always have an open mind to be learning and moving forward with that. And I think to answer your question more specifically, if I were to go back and change anything, it would probably be that. It would probably be to be more open to outside influences and be more succinct with my learnings.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Joseph, I'll put you on the spot. I know Brian mentioned, having policies and that type of thing, procedures, SOPs in place. How does that work for you in sort of maybe a bit of a small, like you mentioned, a smaller business? Do you find those sort of policies help? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to roll right into it. Yeah, yes, they do. And they have caught, like, we've had the odd problem and we have been able to figure it out because, so I do a sheet for each batch I'm making, and then we time and date it, and they write out what you're putting in it so that you can, because sometimes it's a case of you're missing the salt and it's on the sheet that they just left it blank. It just got missed. We are pretty simple, but I did just buy an iPad because I'm tired of all the paper, and it's making life a lot easier because we got the math in it too. So it's like you just put it in, bang, there's your batch size or your recipe size you want. But we still just keep a logbook. I have like a daily log journal. I keep it on the smoker. It's easier for everybody to access. We track and write down the weights of everything we backpack, everything smoking temperatures and fermenting weights and stuff like that, and all goes in the logbook, so it's easier to flip through and find based on, like, I don't have a IPS code per se. We put our packaged on date basically, and then we can go back and find out and figure out which batch it was from there. So very low tech and simple tracking.
Yeah. But it works for the size, like for your business and the way your operations are set up.
Yeah,
and I guess,
and it makes the inspectors happy, and we can find everything I need out of it. And maybe it'd probably be easier to have it linked in some other way, like with the iPad and stuff. Because if there's a problem, it's easier to find everything. Otherwise, you have to go back through it and track back. But yeah, so we track the number off the bags, and we track the actual spice amount or salt amount that went into the batch, and who made it, and the date that's on it.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'll try to switch gears a little bit to answer one of the questions from the audience. So the question is, what can municipalities do to support agribusiness in responding to opportunities and challenges that they're facing today? So Jason, you went first the last time. Do you want to tackle that one first?
I get to go first again, yay. So when it comes to individual municipalities, it's a little bit hard. I mean, most government organizations, as much as they try to put out information in to help as much as they can, and they are there to help, and they do what they can. They just have very full plate. So I mean, I think when we're looking at it broken down by municipalities, again, what I've found the most helpful is those people within your circle or within your community themselves that are in similar or like-minded businesses that can help. Differences, like you got Joseph who's very small, and Brian who's larger. You take those two examples. I mean, pretty much any of the questions that pop up, I'd be able to get answered by going to any one of the panelists we have today, or pointed in the right direction. It's harder for the municipalities to do that. I mean, there are support programs for agri-food and that type of thing, both federally, provincially. I'm not aware of too much through the municipalities. Mike might be better to answer that one. But I just know from my personal experience, the personal network within like-minded businesses has always been most beneficial to me. But Mike, maybe you know a little bit more about municipal support on agri-food?
I certainly know about municipalities and agriculture in general. I can speak to that, about the land use issues in Kings County in particular. We've got a very popular county for people to want to live and retire in, and we've got our main agricultural region as well. So it creates a lot of competing issues with regards to land use. With regards to manufacturing, it's I think not that simple. I think what I'd have to say with wine production and marketing of wine in particular, which I'm most familiar with, Jason, it's important for municipalities to lower their borders. So for instance, the wine industry, the majority of the wineries in Nova Scotia now are within Kings County, that same municipality that I was speaking to. Then, you've got town borders, you've got municipal lines. I think that with regards to agri-food and manufacturing and agritourism in particular, and all those competing factions, and I'm not sure if I'm answering the questions adequately, but I think that the municipalities and towns would be smart to take a more collaborative approach and to lower the boundaries of these regions, because the rules change. I have a town boundary that borders my vineyard, for instance, and the rules completely change when I cross from one piece of property onto the other, what you can and what you can't do. And I suspect it's the same with product manufacturing, et cetera. So I think in general, just to answer it generally, is a more collaborative approach to government from the municipal and the town and the province in general. Just try to create, some sort of consistency with the rules.
Nick, just to flip that, so there would need to be a subject matter expert within the municipality pertaining to land use. But as far as business practices go, there's no reason that municipally, provincially, regionally, we couldn't have what would be, for lack of a better term, called a cluster, where we have, whether it's this panel, there's lots of smart people, both in agri-food and on farms in the farming community, that could get together. And whether it's through the chambers of commerce, exposing, people like, Mr. Lightfoot to maybe a young aspiring, wine producer, or if it's another, if it's a meat problem, maybe they can get, whatever. There's lots of ways we could do it and segment the market. And that's where municipalities can come together, because they have such vast, not just resources, but networks that could, immediately bestow a Michael, a Jason on, a small group of people to get their questions answered. That's where I think municipalities and governments could really help the agri-food business here in this province, and obviously the Valley region in particular. But sorry, I felt that was something that needed to be said. I'd really like to see that, because often people come to me like, hey, I got a food safety plan. Can you help me now with my business plan? I'm sorry. I probably have a lot of opinions. I have, with no data, I'm just an opinion producer. But, I think that would be an important thing to consider at a municipal level and beyond.
Very good. Okay. Thank you. Joseph, do you have something from your
well, you just mentioned, you just mentioned about people looking for business plan and stuff. There's People Works. They helped me back when I started too. So there are programs out there too. I had a thought, but now, something, maybe try to diversify out funding into areas that are like Jason mentioned earlier in the thing about seasonality, things to try to extend seasons and fund things that are off season versus peak season. Peak season tends to look after itself in any business or really in anything, because there's already money coming in, there's already lots of stuff going on. But if you can level it all out, it makes it more profitable and better for everybody. It makes it it's a better province to live in, because now your town has stuff in it. It makes it a better community, because now you have a all year round restaurant in it, or deli or winery, or any of the above stuff. It also helps a business, because you're not such ebb and flow cash flow too. But that's a pretty long-term commitment and game.
Okay. And Brian, anything to add to finish off that question?
I mean, to be completely honest, I don't have a huge amount of experience dealing with municipalities. You know, I could, you know, if you wanted to get into the weeds talking about tax rates and things like that, I could go on all day. But I mean, no, I don't have anything specific. No.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe switch gears a little bit and ask another question, then get back to another question that sent in from the audience, and encourage the audience to keep sending those in, and we'll keep picking at them too. But Joseph, you mentioned you know, that there's some sort of resources. Is there any other resources that or tools that you guys can suggest to people starting out or growing or expanding in different ways? Like, is there any programs or tools or resources that you think are really helpful?
I did the SIB. I did the SIB program when I started the business, self-employment benefit program. I assume it's still in works, and you go through PeopleWorks and they send you the courses and things. I think Jason did it too, but I don't remember. Anyway, I found it helpful. It wasn't perfect for my style of business, but it was definitely helpful. And they have really good statistic numbers on helping businesses succeed.
I think building on what Michael said earlier, I think, you know, going to your peers. I mean, it's a small agri-food community here. You know, it's a small part of the country, and it's an even small subset of the economy. And there's tons of people out there, and like, by no means should anyone think that they're alone, you know, or if you have a problem, it's the first time, or you're the only person that's had that problem, because more than likely everyone, you know, there's lots of people that have had that issue. And I think reaching out to other entrepreneurs, you know, I get calls all the time, and when I have issues, I've reached out to other people. The other thing too is, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be food, like speaking not probably from farming as well, but more from like from the manufacturing standpoint. Manufacturing is manufacturing, you know. I once helped a guy fix an issue at Jazz Airlines because he had been through our plant and he saw something we were doing in our plant, and they were having a problem in their shop. And, you know, it's processes are processes. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily even have to be a food problem. You can steal ideas and steal solutions from any industry, really. So I think just reaching out to people is a really useful thing.
Yeah, I'll add a little. I don't look at it like stealing, Brian, and I know that was just a figure of speech. I look at it like remixing. We all remix from one another. The things I'm doing has been done in the past. I'm trying to do them my way in where I find myself with the products that I have my hands on, with the customers that I deal with, and I make it my own. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think we can all learn from each other, and there's no shame in that game. And as far as like competing, go to what you would traditionally look at like competition. It isn't really competition. I mean, if you're collaborating and if you're staying out of each other's space and being respectful, it's not really competing. You know, the wine industry works great that way. Yes, there's healthy competition within the wine industry. There's no doubt about it. But if my neighbor, you know, his tractor broke and it was harvest season and the rain was coming, I would be there with my crew, helping them clean up their harvest, and suffice they would in turn with me as well. So, you know, don't ever be shy to knock on your neighbor's door, even if they're doing the similar things like Jason and Joe do, and collaborate. We'll get a better product and more uniqueness in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also really important too, just, you know, we are competing on a global market. You know, if you're exporting at all and you want to grow your business, you need to move beyond the borders of Nova Scotia. And the best way for Nova Scotia agri-food to compete globally is for us to work together collaboratively. I totally agree with that. And, you know, if you look at Ford and Toyota, I mean, going back to my lean nerdiness, but they both have permanent engineering offices in each other's plants. And as long as it's not proprietary, if they figure out how to put a bolt onto a tire or onto a car quicker, they share it amongst both organizations. And those are the only two organizations that didn't take bailouts in 2008 because they collaborate.
And on a much bigger level too, there's a reason when you go into any town, you see McDonald's, Burger King, and one other burger place. They're not collaborating, but they are, because they understand the metrics. So, you know, on a large scale too, that is absolutely consistent. It doesn't matter what you're doing, top down segment. It absolutely is the way to go. That's a great point. You know, don't be afraid of what's beyond the other side of the door.
Yeah, I think it's really easy in a small market, whether it's, would be one of my restaurants or food product line, to sit back and put blinders on and be worried about other things coming in. It's touching on what everybody else said. The more we help each other and the more we help grow, the bigger our market becomes, the more we expand outside of our borders. And that translates to almost every business. Restaurants, for example, the better it becomes, the more it becomes a destination, the more people we attract. You can't sit back and have blinders on. There's lots of people to help. They should be happy to help. It just grows our overall industry, whether it's agri-food products, it's wine industry, whatever it is. You should be there, as Mike said, for your neighbor, help grow it. It benefits us all. You just have to look beyond the small market that we're currently in, and as Brian said, look outside of that.
Okay, that sort of segues into a question from the audience. Would you guys agree that in many ways it's more or unnecessarily challenging to start and run an agri-food business in Canada versus most other developed markets? So any comment from anybody that has any knowledge in that area?
I can touch on it from the wine aspect. Certainly, because we're a new industry, we don't have necessarily all the rules and regulations as some of these old world wine regions like France and Italy, and where they're extremely restrictive. In fact, we had individuals come from those regions want to set up here and produce wine that quickly pulled out because we weren't regulated enough for their liking. So, I mean, it can go both ways. I know in the wine industry, because we're such a new region, we're very quickly trying to create the regulations and quality standards right now that will help guide the foundation of the industry moving forward. I can't speak to food production, but certainly in that case, with wine, we're more wide open here.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? Sean?
I was just going to say, selfishly from a food safety perspective, I think if you were to compare, same business here versus other nations or countries, I do think we have some growing to do as far as a food safety culture is concerned. I think is one area that I think we could really help each other. We could demystify, remove a lot of the barriers, bottlenecks, et cetera. And I think that would eliminate a great deal of frustration. I think it's a great time to be in agri-food. I think it's got nowhere to go but up for some time, especially as people now really appreciate the value of being at home, having wine delivered to homes, your favorite farmers, vegetables all potentially delivered to home. Those areas are headed in the right direction. But the segment of the market that I see on a day-to-day basis and listen to our customers, and I've talked with other folks in different nations about their culture, and frankly ours is lacking. And we could I think we've got some I wouldn't say some growing up to do, but I think we've got some changes to that would be very helpful in creating a much easier environment to operate within. We don't all have Brian Alloway's mind or expertise when it comes to food safety, but if we could replicate that, if we could demystify a lot of things, if we could remove some of those bottlenecks and barriers, I think we would have a much quicker path to market for some of our great entrepreneurs who have fantastic product and ideas.
I think if you can run a successful business in Atlantic Canada, you could probably run a successful business anywhere. There's a lot of one of the big problems we find, like talking to all my food manufacturing geeky buddies across the world and the country, we don't have like a very large built-in market here. You know, if you're in Toronto, you've got 3 million people at your doorstep. If you're in Halifax, you got less than 500,000. And then there's only, you know, scattered across the rest of Atlantic Canada, there's, you know, not very many other people. And, you know, if you want to grow your market, you got to go to Ontario. You know, that's the next logical step. Either that, or you have to get big enough and sophisticated enough to have your programs in place to start shipping down to the US, which is not difficult. It's just a lot of work, or putting stuff in containers and sending it over to Europe. And on the other side of that too, we're at the very end of the supply chain here. You know, like anything we have here is brought in, you know, like in lots of circumstances, stuff is brought into the port of Halifax, put on a train, brought to Montreal, you know, decontainerized and brought back to us by truck, you know. So, you know, just sourcing raw materials and bottles and all that stuff is very difficult here in Halifax, or in Nova Scotia anyway. So yeah, I think there's definitely some specific challenges we have, but I mean, lots of people are doing it. But you just got to think outside the box and cooperate.
I think, yeah, to your point too, right? If you can run a successful business in this region, you know, stands to reason you probably have a very good chance of running it in other countries. But that, I mean, so sort of the point I was making is that different, you know, the difference that exists, that whether it's mentality or culture, not just food safety, otherwise there are some things that I think we could learn. You know, like there's no reason that, you know, Emirates can't be a country that we could befriend and get to know. Same with Germany and other places we ship our products to understand what they're doing successfully, to learn from them as well. So I'm not really answering that gentleman's question, but
I'll jump in there. I mean, to loop back to the question. I mean, I don't think doing an agri-food business in Canada is unnecessarily harder than any other country. Sure, do we have our hurdles? Yes. But having worked with other agri-food businesses in other countries, it's just different problems. Something that may be easier in Canada may be more of a challenge in the US. And there's tons of examples. You know, food safety may be a little bit more challenging in Canada, but a little easier in another country. So I really don't think it's any different. It's just a different set of problems. At the end of the day, if you're in agri-food, you're always going to need to overcome problems. The S being at the end of the supply chain makes it a little bit more unique. But again, having worked with many agri-food businesses in multiple countries, Europe, the US, they have problems as well. I don't think Canada is unique to that. It's just different.
All right, Joseph, I don't know if you have any thoughts in that area. I've got one more question I'm hoping to get to here in the last couple minutes too. So
I think businesses can be challenging in general, and we do have rough frame structure in Nova Scotia, but it's just like Jason said. I agree with him. It's just different. That's about all I got on it. So,
okay, thank you. All right, I'll move on to another question from the audience. Does the consideration of carbon enter your business or your supply chains, and are you able to capitalize on this? So open that to anybody that wants to start us off.
I'll start you off.
It's good.
With my size, I haven't taken it into consideration. Half the time, I'm scared I'm not going to get pork in at the moment, so it isn't. Keep my doors open is more across my mind than the carbon footprint at the moment. But we're really, really small anyway, so I don't suspect it's very large.
Anybody else want to add to that? Thank you, Joseph. Okay. In sort of getting your businesses started and new product lines or expanding, you know, is there any tools? You know, we talked about data before, and we've talked a bit about resources or programs, but you know, is there any challenges you've faced with you know, expanding or putting out a new product that folks can sort of learn from at all? It's a fairly general question, but I guess just any sort of last advice to sort of end us off here.
Yeah, the question is, are there any learnings from past launches of products? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do some market study. It was mentioned, you know, sitting in a coffee shop, checking out what people are buying, watching trends. Social media today is quite important to see trends. I've always been a huge proponent of travel, not lately, of course, but back pre-COVID, we were constantly traveling, and every time we would return home, I would have all these great ideas. I think that's hugely important. To see what the trends are in other parts of the world. You know, we're not only on the end of the supply chain in Nova Scotia, we're on the end of the idea train, and trends and things always come here 4 or 5 years at best, beyond other places. So yeah, the people in the early days that saw Tim Hortons in pop up in Ontario and jumped on it. I mean, you know, all these things. There's tons of examples everywhere you look as to trends and getting ahead of the trends. So when you're launching new products, find out what those trends are elsewhere, through social media, through your contacts, your mentors, and travel, and try to get ahead of it here, and don't rip anyone off, as we've discussed. Make it your own. Make it Nova Scotian, and our folks in Nova Scotia will really gravitate towards it. There's been tons of t-shirts made in the world, but none that say East Coast pride, right? And, you know, our people here in the East Coast support local. It hasn't been brought up today. So, you know, make sure you're using local products as much as possible and promoting local. And yeah, try to prevent greenwashing. So, you know, stay true to yourself. And I think that's the best way to launch any new product.
I can go, Nick. We just launched the newest version of our software, which is a complete rebuild of our MVP product, our first product. And my advice, you know, and I did this with the team, is rolling up your sleeves and going to all of our existing customers, right? Getting on, in some cases, farms with, you know, at obscene hours of the day, because that's the only time you get with the farmer, or same with the processor. You know, you really got to listen to your market, especially if it's going to be a new product, and really emphasize the importance of collecting that data so that you can understand. You shouldn't, you know, just because you got a new idea doesn't mean you should put it to market, process it in 30 days. You should probably do some research on it, because they're going to buy what's different about you, right? Why do people buy Lynch products versus Lightfoot products? Like, you know, there's wine, there's salad, Caesar salad dressing, and there's wine, other options than the two gentlemen here on this panel. But why do people buy from them? Why do they buy consistently, right? And that's what you need to understand. That's what you need to spend your time listening to, and that's, you know, just imperative, because we launched, and we have probably about 45 days of fix-ups and bug fixes to do. So it ain't gonna be perfect, right? But we listened enough to get, you know, 80%. We listened, but we took us a year. I mean, we listened a lot. We listened more than we talked. 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? So that would be my advice, is whatever facet that is, to listen. You know, it could be a feedback loop. It could be conversations. It could be do those unscalable things early in your discovery, you know, about market opportunity before you ever hit, you know, the gas on spending resources. Would be my approach, in my opinion.
I've seen a number of people launch new products, and they've spent enormous amounts of money on packaging or boxes and labels or formulations or whatever, and it turns out the product just didn't work. So going back to your super nerdy MVP point, you know, a minimum viable product is what's needed. You know, you just need to get a product out there that tastes great, you know, is on point in terms of quality and flavor, but the label doesn't have to be perfect. The packaging doesn't have to be perfect. You know, you can use customer feedback, and like we use customer complaints constantly. The customer complaints are the best form of feedback. Use that feedback, and then you drive, you know, the next 1,000 labels you print, you change the instructions on it or whatever to make it a bit easier for people to use. The other thing I've seen a number. I mean, I've been involved in the co-packing game for a very long time, and I've seen a huge amount of people make decisions on products and new products and product launches based on their hearts and not their heads. You know, they truly believe, they love the product so much and they think it's going to work, but they haven't run the data, they haven't run the numbers, they haven't done that basic arithmetic to see whether it's going to work or not. And you know, I've fallen into that trap too, and it's very easy to do, but it's really important to make sound decisions based on you know, data opposed to just what you think is going to happen.
I think it's probably hard for people to sometimes struggle to find that balance of, you know, price point and quality and being local and having, you know, maybe that nice packaging, or it's hard, I think, for folks to find that balance starting things out too.
It is. Brian's got a real valid point. Like when I first started with my product line, my labels and product line wasn't developed to the point it is today. It started off with imperfect labels. It was, you know, it was more based on consumer wants. I made sure it was a product that was wanted, that would sell, that had the data behind it to grow. Those things came. The product line developed out, the labeling developed out into, you know, a very detailed system after the fact. One of the things that I discovered as I went through the retail food product line is there are times where things will surprise you. You will have products that by no means does the data that you're gleaming make any sense at all for why a product takes off. I had one product in particular that never should have taken off to the level of which it did, but it did, which created another whole set of issues that had to be dealt with. I mean, it's a good problem to have when you have a product that sells way more than you expected. The data was there for it to be supportive and profitable, but not to the level that it saw out of the gate. So it can create other problems. But I mean, first and foremost, I would agree with Brian, make sure your product's viable and it makes sense, and the other details can be worked out. And the, you know, complaints and feedback are important.
Okay. Any final thoughts on that question? And otherwise, we'll look to wrap up here.
My only thing is I've found often, especially doing food, is that a lot of people, one, aren't running numbers like you guys were saying. Make sure it's profitable, and profitable in agribusiness seems to sometimes be a dirty word. But you're not going to be here tomorrow if you don't make it profitable. I know your numbers. Don't compare them to somebody else's. When I first started the business, I was so overwhelmed just trying to get open that I essentially gave away everything for 3 months because I wasn't making $1 on any of it. I didn't price it right. So sometimes you need to take a breath and just do the paperwork and make sure everything's ready to go.
Mike, anything to add there? I know you mentioned before the industry, the winery where you're at, the area is really competitive, and you know, how do you find that balance of price, quality, value, and all the other traits like, you know, local, and how do you find that to balance that in your business?
For me and for us as a family, it's about being authentic. It's about telling our story through food and wine and experience, and just being who we are, being authentic, not trying to emulate, you know, a European winery, not trying to emulate anything else. Our neighbor is just being who we are. I think that's a big thing. A couple other quick last parting thoughts that I have is I was raised, anybody raising kids that want to aspire them into entrepreneurship, stop them from saying the word can't. I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs and farmers, and I was punished literally if I ever said the word can't in my house. I've instilled that in my own children, and I would strongly suggest anybody in a family business that's thinking about succession to do the same. Our kids need to be empowered to know that they can do anything that they want to do. And it's our job to be the teachers and the mentors to them to bring them up through. That's it.
Great, thanks for that, Mike. Any other final thoughts or anything that I sort of didn't prompt any of the panelists to discuss that maybe you wanted to answer or comment on? Okay. Not hearing any, we'll wrap up now. And listen, panelists, I really want to thank all of you for being on here and providing your insights. And you're a great crowd with a lot of different experience. So I really thank you for taking the time out of your day to make this session a really great end to the series. A question came in about the session being recorded. I said at the beginning, the session will be recorded and it's posted on Perennia's YouTube page. So if you did happen to come into the session late, feel free to check on Perennia's YouTube page, and the contact information will be shared with all of the audience members by email, I believe, after the session. So again, I want to thank the panelists and thank everybody in the audience and those asking questions and listening in. And we look forward to the series next year, being live and virtually. So thanks very much, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.